Good afternoon, folks, East Coast time. Good morning, folks, West Coast time. And good evening, good night time, folks, India, who may be watching this live stream brought to you by the US India Political Action Committee and the Imagine India Institute. My name is Robinder Sachdev. I'm the president of the Imagine India Institute. Every Saturday, noon EST time, we host a discussion on topics of the day pertaining especially to the Indian American community and often also, of course, on US India relations. This Saturday, we are bringing up a topic which I think is of much interest and concern also to a whole lot of people amongst the Indian American community and also people back in India, because a lot of folks on work visa in the US also, right? Or in some other categories or waiting for green cards or citizenship, etc. That said, it is my pleasure to now welcome with us the panel that we have with us for today. We have with us Mr. Muzaffar Chishti, Senior Fellow at the Migration Policy Institute of the NYU School of Law. Thank you, Mr. Chishti, for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
We have Anne Robertson with us, an immigration attorney and also the owner of Robertson Immigration Law Firm. Thank you, Anne, for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
We have with us Dr. Mustafa Bayoumi. He is a professor of English at the Brooklyn College at the City University of New York. Thank you so much, Dr. Mustafa Bayoumi, for joining us.
It's great to be back, Robinder.
Pleasure. We have with us Steve Rao, council member, third term, and a former mayor pro tem for the city of Morrisville, North Carolina. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us.
Pleasure, Robinder, always.
Thank you so much. Okay, folks, for the benefit of our audiences and viewers, this is going live on the Facebook page of the US India Political Action Committee and on the Facebook page of the Imagine India Institute. Please, folks, if you're watching by, check by, wave by, put in your questions, and we are sure our distinguished panel will be more than happy to, take in your questions and share their thoughts on the questions that you may have. The topic for the day today, as we said, is about immigration in the United States, or what do we see of it. The format of this discussion and a conversation goes in rounds. Each panelist shares their opinions and views. For the record, the US India Political Action Committee and also the Imagine India Institute, we are a non-partisan, bipartisan platform. We welcome all colors of views and opinions as a dialogue or discussion. This is not a debate this is not a debate that we're looking at and not looking to score any points any which way. It's a discussion towards a collective narrative which may emerge from the views of our eminent panel. Now, that said, the opening round of question for each of our panel would be to give us their take on the topic of the day. What do you make of the immigration proposed reforms and what we are seeing in the past few days as the Biden presidency has started? Where do you see it going? What do you see the challenges, or what is your take on this? May I begin this panel by inviting Mr. Mustafa Chishti for his opening comments, about 2 to 3 minutes, please, sir.
Yeah, I think you confused me. This is Muzaffar Chishti. So, this is an extraordinarily bold agenda. I mean, this is clearly the boldest immigration agenda any administration has put out in decades, and certainly in the first 100 days of administration. We knew that the Biden administration was going to introduce a series of proposals thematically on day one day on climate change, one day on economic policy, one day on other things. But to decide that they were going to do one day on immigration, that was going to be yesterday. It's now being postponed till Tuesday. But on top of that, they decided to bring the issue of immigration to the top of the agenda by issuing a set of policy proposals on day one. About 2 memoranda and 6 executive actions were issued on day one, along with the blueprint to Congress for what the Biden administration would like to see the future of immigration through legislation to look like. Now, this covers a waterfront from what we do with interior enforcement to how do we change the definition of an immigrant from alien to non-citizen in our immigration law. So the boldness of the proposal really cannot be disregarded. The issue is the bold as this proposal is, it meets a lot of obstacles. Some are around for some time and some have emerged more recently. The most important obstacle, certainly on the legislative front, is that we're dealing with a pandemic. COVID is going to take all the bandwidth in Congress and the administration for next year or so. That's going to leave very little space for any major other legislation to advance. I think the president is confronted with a problem emerging at the border. If the caravans of immigrants arrive at the southwest border from the Central American countries, the optics and the substantive challenge that presents, I think, is going to make it very difficult to do a quick advance on immigration. And third is that, despite his boldness, he has a very thin, razor-thin majority in both the House and the Senate, the Democrats do. So you need at least you need more than a handful of Republicans, pretty close to 15 Republicans, because Biden is probably going to lose about 5 Democrats on a bold agenda. So this proposal has to have a Republican agenda, and we haven't seen that as yet. So therefore, that's going to make a bipartisan effort difficult. And the last thing I would say is that Donald Trump is still hovering around American politics, that if he stays alive as a political factor for the next 2 years, it's going to make it very difficult for many Republicans to be seen as pro-immigrant.
Thank you so much. My apologies, the first names I mixed up between Dr. Mustafa and Mr. Muzaffar. My apologies.
That's right.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, very pertinent points. You said that it's a very bold agenda. That aspect cannot be disregarded. And an interesting point you make that, what is the, skin of the game for the Republican side of the aisle so that they also get on board the bill or the overall omnibus approach. Thank you so much, sir. May I now invite Ann Robertson, immigration attorney and owner of the Robertson Law Firm, for your opening comment, please.
Well, my opening comments have to do with the fact that my phone is ringing off the hook, that Indian Americans are calling me and saying, okay, just be straight with me. What does this mean for me? So what I'd like to address during my time here is the practicalities. What is the practical impact of what has happened so far? And in fact, with the executive orders, the practical impact for my Indian clients is really not very much. The practical impact is not anything that's going to make much difference to their day-to-day lives for probably 95% of my Indian American clients. What would make a huge difference, of course, would be the passage of the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021. As Mr. Chisti has already pointed out, I'm not really very optimistic. I've been practicing immigration law for 28 years. I have many Indian American clients. Most of them are focused on the whole employment-based category. We know what a disaster that's been. As an immigration attorney, practically we have been living through hell because of what's been happening with the whole employment-based category. And the family-based category too has been a mess. So I'd like to talk about it's a big if there. Let's make sure it's a big if. If certain parts of the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021 should pass, what are the practical impact that could have on the immigration situation of Indian Americans? And then thirdly, I think it's important for us to be practical. Let's look at it. I've been working with Joe Biden since last August. The best we can do in terms of getting the content of the bill is 3.5 pages. There's a lot of markups and things that have to be done. So we've really just got an outline so far of what would be included in this bill, but what's there is just amazing, as Mr. Chidi's pointed out. The last time there was a comprehensive immigration law change was 1965. Let's be aware of that. The last time there were any major tweaking was 1986, 1996. It's been a long time, folks. And we've had fabulous people pushing for change, such as George Bush. George W. Bush was one of the best friends immigration could have. And even our own people here in North Carolina, Republicans pushing for bills, Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. And it hasn't happened. So let's talk about the practicalities. Yes, this sounds great. Is it going to happen? maybe part of it. What parts are more likely to happen than others? So I'm going to kind of get down in the trenches and talk about the practicalities of what has been presented.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. In fact, and as you point out that, what's been the practical impact so far, and especially on the immigrant communities, and let's say especially the Indian American community. So there's a lot of stuff out there, but where does it really make a difference? And as I said that, we are really fortunate, or it's a good, excellent panel we have between scholars, academics, analysts, and practitioners. So thank you so much, Anne, for your thoughts and comments. Now, may I move to Dr. Mustafa Bayumi for your opening thoughts and comments on the topic of the day. Sir, please.
Well, I think what I would like to emphasize is just the feeling of relief that I think is coming from a lot of the Muslim and Arab communities that I'm in communication with. Since one of the first actions that the president did was to repeal the Muslim ban that was brought in by Donald Trump, as we all know, and then later made law through the Supreme Court ruling. To have that dismantled on the first day of office feels like a needed, not just a breath of fresh air, but really a more humanitarian, a more human-centered approach towards immigration rather than a purely ideological or even purely political. So I think there's some measure of optimism there. I mean, we also saw that with just in the last couple of days, they've now also, the administration has reopened TPS, temporary protected status, for Syrians into the country as well, and allowing for new enrollees, which is something that the Trump administration had not allowed for. We also, I think we're going to see refugee allotments go back up, which is going to be also good news for many people who are fleeing war-torn situations. So, yes, there's definitely going to be a lot of fights in front of us. But what we're seeing in general, I think, is something that we really should take note of, which is a much more human-centered and just generous approach to immigration. And I just want to, admire that, at least in the moment, because pretty soon we're going to get back into the weeds and be arguing about very specific things as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bayumi. Yeah, absolutely. There's too much out there. And I think in the subsequent rounds, we'll kind of dig in a bit more deeper onto the exact issues and aspects that each of our previous speakers and you have also mentioned. Thank you so much, sir. May I now invite Steve Rao, Council Member for Morrisville, North Carolina. Sir, your views on this topic, your take on it.
Well, thank you, everybody. And I'm going to just give you a little bit of a perspective of someone's in the trenches as a city councilman, the longest serving Indian American in North Carolina, been going on my 10th year. And, what I will say is that I'm also here as a member of the New American Economy, which is a board chaired by former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg. And what I've been seeing is the economic impact that immigration has every day in North Carolina, the 9th largest state. Almost every week, I get calls from Indian Americans that are on the H-1B skilled visas. We have about 40,000 here in Raleigh-Durham area. And they're either can't move between jobs, their spouses can't work, and they're innovating at our universities. They're filling many of the technology jobs, not only that we need today, but for many of the new jobs that are emerging in AI, vaccine research, robotics, and North Carolina is a tech economy. We're one of the third fastest growing economies in tech. And so, just a few numbers I'll throw at you. 32% of our STEM graduates are foreign born. 62% of our professors are, foreign born of our, PhD universities. And we have many in physicians, nurse assistants. And in North Carolina, there's 62,178 immigrant-owned businesses that contribute about $1.68 billion to our economy. But 25,000 of those are undocumented immigrant founders. And those undocumented immigrants in North Carolina bring in about $32 billion to our tax base. So I'm giving you a lot of numbers from the New American Economy because I think it's important to understand that this is about jobs. It's about dollars for the state of North Carolina and across this country. It's also about foreign-born innovation. I can speak more about the Asian Americans that I see, but at the end of the day, we wouldn't have a Zoom, we wouldn't be on Slack, we wouldn't have Google, we wouldn't be able to drive a Tesla or watch an international space station or we wouldn't have President Trump, former president, tweeting on his phone every 5 minutes if it wasn't for immigrants. And I think at the end of the day, immigration has been a dirty word that's connected with rapists and terrorists and murderers. But I think it's about there's 865,000 in North Carolina contributing 7.7 billion to our economy. So I think it's about jobs, it's about empathy, and I'll just close out with symbolism, which I think is important. That the daughter of an immigrant is now the vice president of the United States of America. And I think that's something that all of us, wherever we are in the world, can be proud of. And I hope that anyone watching this show, we want you to know that American greatness is built upon the notion that we want the best and brightest to come to our country. We have work to do in terms of the bill passing. I'm going to leave that to the experts, Ann Robertson and everybody. But I think it's a step in the right direction, protecting the dreamers, extending the path of citizenship for those who are legally, addressing the issues, extending citizenship to the undocumented immigrants. And I hope that we can come together and finally modernize our immigration system.
Sure.
So.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you. Absolutely. I mean, that's the hope, and that's the bright aspects of the US, of course, as a society, and the fact that yes, immigrants have reached, unfathomed heights now, as we can see. Thank you so much, Steve. Now we move on to the second round, and folks, whosoever may be watching, I see quite a few people are watching, but maybe not, putting any questions, because you might be thinking this is a recording or a video recording playing out. This is a live show. So any questions that you would like to have from our guests, we'll be more than happy to take, and they can then give their comments on that. So please keep your questions or bring in questions. We would love to have questions so that we can have more engagement. Thank you so much. Now moving to the second round. In this round, my question, big picture, would be that the executive orders which President Biden has been kind of signing up, of course, right? Some of them are, on their way to be implemented, because what Trump did also was he brought them through, executive orders and not through legislation. So that trade-off, which was there. So my question is that, how much can President Biden do with executive orders and rulemaking minus the legislation? Which one of this whole, all these pieces, and what of those many pieces can have practical benefit or impact for the immigrant communities? Mr. Chishti, may I begin with you, sir?
Yeah.
Sure. I think first I really want to underscore what Professor Bayuri said, that look, narrative in this topic is extremely important. Listen, we just finished 4 years of a presidency which had framed immigration as a national and economic threat. And we have in one day, the day of the inauguration, signaled to the whole world that there's a new day in America, at least on this issue, that immigration is an asset and it's an American value, both to be nurtured and enhanced. That's very important from the bully pulpit. And then he set in motion a series of executive orders which basically put in place his vision. And some of them may feel symbolic to people that, look, the travel ban obviously may not affect a lot of people, but it had sent a message to the world that we discriminated against a group of people just because of their faith. And that message is important to reverse. And I think we're going to have some executive actions which have far-reaching impact. First, just on day one, what he said about immigration enforcement, that during the Trump era, almost any unauthorized person in this country was game to be picked up. That if you were an ordinary status violator, a nanny or a landscaper, if you left your home in the morning, you have no criminal history, there was no guarantee that you would come home at night. Now, that's an existential anxiety to be carried around with you all day. Now, that is going to be lifted. Now, only people who are criminals or have national security concerns, espionage concerns, will now be targets for enforcement. That's on the interior force. That's obviously a big development. And I think we expect that refugee admissions will go up to about 125,000 It will be, I think, hard for people to be resettled very quickly, but at least the president has full authority in expanding that number. I think we're going to see some significant changes at the border. I think they will take some time because we essentially gutted our asylum system. We abandoned our obligations under international law. And we're going to have, I think, a functioning asylum system, which is going to provide people protections under our law, but at the same time prevent a deluge. That's the balance that this administration is going to strike in the next few months.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chishti. Yeah, absolutely. I think the one big aspect, yes, which you pointed out and which Dr. Mustafa has also pointed out, is the fact that the narrative of immigration as being a threat to national security as well as economic security on both those fronts, which had taken such life and such a momentum. So that's been kind of that's been brought back to rails or tracks, if I may say so. Thank you, sir, so much. May I now invite Anne Robertson for your thoughts on this point that executive orders, how far can they go in terms of practical applications? And by the way, on the work visa and all, that's the next round. So we will get into the H-1 visa, green cards, and backlogs and not there. So in this round, still, the aspect of how much can be achieved via executive orders and how much of comfort can that really bring?
I'm afraid I'm the negative voice here. I'm sorry. Practicing 28 years and making it very practical gets to be very depressing sometimes. I remember an executive order where I was so excited. DAPA, Deferred Action for Parents of Americans. If you had a U.S. citizen child, that was an executive order, and it was comparable to DACA. Wow, we were so excited, and we really got moving on that. That got struck down. We've already had that happen with Biden. It was actually a memorandum, not an executive order, which said for 100 days, while we kind of get our act together, for 100 days, there will be no deportations in the United States for any reason whatsoever. A judge from Texas has already struck that down. It's gone. So the scary thing about executive orders, because yes, it can do wonderful things. DACA is an executive order. That's an example. As you know, they tried to kill it in the courts and did kill part of it for a long time. What I'm concerned about is the extent to which executive orders can withstand any kind of challenges in the courts. DAPA, Deferred Action for Parents of Americans, was completely struck down. We've already had part of one of Biden's plans struck down. So yes, there are great things executive orders can do as long as they don't get struck down in the courts. Sorry to be such a negative voice.
Sure. No, thank you so much for your insights and your experience. I think that's what we all look forward to, and our viewers also look forward to. And we did have one viewer, commenting by. Thank you so much, Mona Manihar. She is saying Rao. Maybe she heard the Steve Rao's portion first, or whichever one. Great points that most people do not bring to the table. Thank you so much, Mona. Please keep your questions coming, folks.
Wow.
And please ask questions, actually. Comments are great,
Mona, you just made my day. I'm with some very smart people. I feel like I'm out of my pay grade today with this group.
Awesome. Yeah. So, folks, please keep your comments and questions coming. That helps us to kind of liven up the discussion and get more engagement for our distinguished panel. Thank you so much, Mona, and thank you so much, Anne. Now, may I move to Dr. Mustafa? Sure. So once again, let's say coming back to the concern that you raised, or the change in the meta-narrative, right? That immigration is a threat, or immigrants are a threat to national and economic security. Linking it to the executive orders, or what the initial days of 100 days of Biden presidency, let's say, how much of an impact do you see that making? Or kind of demolishing that narrative? If not demolishing, is it kind of chipping away at that narrative?
I mean, I believe it has that potential, but I guess the real problem is about just the larger dysfunctionality of American politics, that we rely so much on executive orders for just for politics in this country. And that's, the problem with an executive order is that it can be done with the stroke of a pen and undone again with the stroke of a pen. So we need something that's more durable and long lasting. And that's where legislation should be coming in. And of course, the problem is, though, that legislation is at such a gridlock in this country and has become even more ideologically opposed. so that it becomes really difficult to accomplish substantial change with legislation. And we have a history of good things and bad things with executive orders. I don't think we should forget that Japanese internment actually was an executive order itself. So the real question is, how prepared are we as a country through our legislators really to put down roots for solid, substantive change on this issue? And that means having really difficult conversations. That means actually trying to understand the direction we want the country to move in. And this is a divided country in a lot of ways, and so these are the problems. And the other side of that. Well, maybe I'll just leave it there for right now.
Sure. No, thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the country is very, very much divided. And I mean, the point is that, over a period of time, there's so many pieces and nuances of immigration related that have kind of, cobbled together. How to kind of, will one comprehensive reform do, or as there is some talk that why not maybe have, some separate bills rather than one, big bill which kind of works on, let's say, immigration. We have another audience. It has coming in the question. Is from Prasad saying, sorry if this topic has already been addressed or out of topic. Is there any update or progress in removing country limit on green card? Thank you so much, Prasad. In fact, we are heading into the next round on that very much question, right? The next round would be on, the backlogs and H1, etc. So please stay on, and I'm sure our, distinguished panel will answer your question about the country limits on green cards. Now, may I move to, please, Steve Rao, for your comments on this particular aspect, executive orders, how soon, what can we see? And of course, the whole idea is legislation. And then how much are Republicans, as one of our panelists, I think Mr. Chishti said, that what's in it for the Republicans to kind of come together for this huge reform. Thank you so much, Prasad. See, engagement helps. So this is a Facebook Live. Please bring in your questions. We will take up your questions direct to our guests. Thank you. Please, Steve.
Well, I'll start on a positive note about some of the executive orders I did like. One's already been mentioned, eliminating the ban on Muslim travel. I think, if we look back at history, many people came to America, even the first pilgrims, to flee from religious persecution from the Church of England. So in America, we never target anyone based on their religion. So I like that one. I like the census one that's been proposed about, counting every vote counts, and obviously protecting the dreamers. Many of these dreamers that I see are, younger, and they're entrepreneurs, and they can stimulate all parts of our economy in North Carolina. And, I think, not to be negative, but I think it's always better, in my opinion, to have legislation, because like someone earlier said, one executive order, turn the stroke of a pen, overturn it with another executive order. I was talking to someone in Australia the other day on a business call, and he said, is America a nation of executive orders? We don't even know what's going on over there because everyone's doing executive order. So I think that we have to get back to having a bipartisan solution, and getting the Republicans and Democrats agreeing that the first thing we have to do is to modernize our immigration system. And to do that. And the final thing I'll say, and this is probably a conversation for another time, and probably a surprise to many people since I was on the Biden leadership team, but I think President Biden's doing too many executive orders. And that's a conversation for another time, but there's so many executive orders coming out so fast that I think it's taking away the focus from the number one priority, which should be vaccinating as many Americans as possible, and then figuring out how to focus the time on getting bills. But that's just my opinion. I know that people probably disagree with me, but it's just so much so fast that each executive order every day, 31 executive orders, more than any president in modern history, just in the last, and he's been in office for 10 days. So it's rather confusing.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm reminded of, in this age of memes, there was one meme floating around which said that done by a Sharpie. President Trump used to love signing with a Sharpie, undone with a ballpoint pen. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's there. And secondly, to the point of executive orders and rule making therein, I'm given to understand that there have been so many, by the way, executive orders and interlocking rules, etc., issued, maybe over 400, I was told, relating to immigration. And one attorney was telling me that even if Biden administration works full time, it'll take them maybe 4 years to undo a lot of what the rules
Yeah.
and have been implemented. So
Yeah.
that's the other challenge, and that's absolutely there. So thank you so
Yeah.
much, Steve. Uh, Now, may I come to Mr. Chishti, please, for the next round? In this round, sir, and Madam, we will be focusing on the issue of work visas, green cards, backlog, as one of our audiences was asking, any update or progress in the country limits on green cards. So on this issue, the H-1B children aging out, right? So if around these topics, work visa related, green card related, what do you see happening, Mr. Chishti?
So, I mean, I think, first of all, listen, none of us are going to be giddy about executive actions. We all know their limitations. I think President Johnson is most well known to have said that he thought they were just like piece of paper that could be torn apart. But Johnson lived in an era where legislation was very easy to do. He could really tell members of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, what to do. That's not the reality of today. That's why presidents have fallen for executive action. Darker that Anne very well pointed out. President Obama came to this only because Congress just would not do a legislation on dreamers. So these are sort of presidents have been forced to do these things just because legislature doesn't act. Similarly, coming to the point of what's going to happen, talk about what immediately has happened on the work visas, which is the president yesterday issued 3 orders lifting the ban of people for work visas, both non-immigrant and permanent immigrant, which had been imposed in April, June, and September this year by President Trump because of COVID, that those bans have been lifted. U.S. consulate abroad will now be able to issue both non-immigrant and immigrant visas on employment breaks. That he could do by a Sharpie or a ballpoint. I don't think that's going to be challenged. Now, coming to legislation, which is where the rubber meets the road, I think talking about the 60 votes that any legislation now needs because of filibuster. So when you look at narrower, you're now looking at legislation which can need only 50 votes, which is what happens in a process called reconciliation. That there are certain pieces of legislation which, if they have a budgetary impact, they can go only through reconciliation process that needs 50 votes. So people are now looking at what are those small pieces which can go on a reconciliation bill. And frankly, targets of this are subgroups of unauthorized population. To me, the most logical are essential workers. That if COVID is an important challenge of our country, there are a lot of people who have helped us stay home by delivering food, by meat packing, by working on the farms. So you can't be essential worker and deportable at the same time. So some relief for essential workers, I think, probably is high in the cat. You could put next group of people could be dreamers, agricultural workers, possibly temporary protected status. Whatever the body politic can sustain is the small groups that can happen. On your point about the country caps, which affects Indian nationals particularly, and can talk more about it. In the employment-based categories, the legislation, which is the proposal, which is obviously not would remove the per-country caps. On the family-based immigration, it would increase the per caps from 7 to about 15%, which would also open up more visas for people in those countries. Again, but there's a lot of slip between the cup and the lip here. Just because it's a proposal people should not be excited that this is going to become law in the next few days.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chishti, for your thoughts and comments. And Prasad, I hope that you got some flavors or some aspect or a particular, at least insight to the question that you have. And this round will be hovering around all of that particular topic. Mona Manier says, brilliant. Yeah, that's a great point, Mona. Thank you for listening in. See, we have some audiences who stay on. Normally, Facebook Live people come for 5-10 minutes, move on. Right. So it's great to have audiences who are listening to the conversation and engaging with us. Thank you so much, Mona. Yes, she's referring to the point which Mr. Chishti mentioned, that you cannot be an essential worker and deportable at the same time. Thank you so much, Mona. And thank you so much, Mr. Chishti, for your comments. Now, may I come to Anne Robertson, please? Anne, same open-ended question to you relating to work visas, backlogs, country cap. What are you seeing? What would you say?
Well, the people who call my office say, how long do I have to wait? Okay, very practical question. In 1965, let's be clear, 1965, our immigration law was changed. Before that, there was a certain number of green cards per country, period. And they allegedly got rid of the per country cap. And I hear everybody here saying, what? Are you crazy? There's a horrible per country cap right now. But in 1965, they wrote into the law, no country can get more than 7% of the green cards in that particular category. No country. So I'm sure everybody here knows about the visa bulletin. And the visa bulletin is horrible. For India, which of course gets lots of green cards, in the employment-based category, let's see, the one category moved ahead 4 days, and the other one moved ahead 10 days, and another category moved ahead 10 days in 1 month. And the starting date was 2009 and 2010. So when somebody calls my office and says, how long do I have to wait? Actually, if you're in the category, a family-based category where you are petitioning for your married son or daughter, or you're a permanent resident with somebody over 21, you'll wait forever because it's not moving at all. It is stuck from 1 month to the other. It doesn't move ahead 1 day. So this is a critically important problem for my Indian clients. The whole backlog in the visa bulletin is a nightmare. Now, as Mr. Chisi has already pointed out, thank goodness, the proposed law said there will be no per country cap in the employment-based area, which is fabulous. None. For some reason, in the family-based category, they didn't eliminate the per country cap. They said it would be reduced, okay? And there's no numbers because we don't have the bill yet, so we don't know. But it would be phenomenal. For my Indian American clients, this is probably one of their biggest nightmares, in addition to the H-1Bs and the Ls, and we can talk about that later. But this is probably one of their biggest nightmares, is this whole visa bulletin. And I'm sorry to say it was created in 1965. So I'm hoping that this will be a huge push. If my Indian American clients ask me, I need to go out there and lobby, what do I need to lobby for? I think this would be the top of the list. I really do.
Thank you so much, and absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think before 1965, the number of visas for Indians was 100 visas, I think, per year. Just the visas, if I'm not mistaken. But of course, you guys would know. You could correct me. But yeah, 65 was a turning point in that sense. May I now invite Dr. Mustafa for your thoughts and analysis of the situation as you heard from Mr. Chishti, and where do we see it going?
Well, I'll defer to the experts when it comes to the everyday realities of crime. Although personally myself, I actually have gone through the whole immigration system in this country, so I know how painful and long that can last. But I will say this, is that, on the bigger picture, the population of the United States is aging quickly. And, there needs to be an influx of young, working, people in this country to keep our society going on at the level that we want to maintain it. So there are all kinds of practical reasons to be supportive of immigration. One doesn't even have to get into a kind of ethical reasons. There can even be selfish reasons to be in support of immigration in this country. And I also teach a class on immigration to New York City, actually here at the City University of New York. And we talk about things like the 65 change, for example. Prior to 65, it was all Northern Europeans, though, also who came to this country. So there was a huge difference that happened in post-1965 as well. But one of the things that I actually ask my students to do in the beginning of that class is just to write a small, 2-page narrative of their lives and how they came to this country in some way or form. And I've been shocked, especially, in maybe a few years ago, it was that generation who had come from the 86 amnesty, and they were now, their parents had been amnestied in 1986 with the Ronald Reagan change in immigration. And they wrote about the fact that their parents had been here undocumented very openly, and because now they themselves, of course, had all of the paperwork in order at this point. But again, and they were really coming from all different parts of the world too. And so I think it's really important to think about the ways in which regularizing and legalizing these people who are in the shadows right now will have such a greater benefit, not just in their immediate lives, but actually for the life of the nation at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting and very, of course, I mean, true as such. I mean, that's the reality in that sense. Thank you for your, your views and insight on this. That yes, yeah, it's not only the 10 million right now, but the future is what the future is. The future of America, which kind of or the growth of America, which is out there. And then from a big picture, yes, of course, the whole question of talent and aging society and disruption from technology and all of that and competitiveness, etc., which are the core engines of America and American values. Thank you so much, Dr. Mustafa. May I now invite Steve Rao, sir, for your thoughts on this aspect which is pertaining to the backlog green cards or citizenship or H1 and all. And as Anne said, maybe Steve, you're a public figure. Okay, so as she suggested, lobby. So lobby for what she said, right? So would you? Okay, before I go in, we have another comment coming in from Prasad. Thank you, Prasad, watching. Prasad says, thanks for those details and insights. Thank you so much, Prasad. It's a pleasure, and it always is a matter of joy for us, as organizers of the show. And I think similarly for the panelists to have real-time, questions and comments and feedback coming to us. That's what makes the nature of a live stream more interesting. Thank you so much, Prasad. Please stay with us. Steve,
Yeah.
so what would your activism be pertaining to immigration now, especially regarding green cards, backlogs, H1, etc.?
First of all, in my constituent services in Morrisville, just last week, I got 5 immigration requests in 1 week, one a day, and ranging from a spouse that's an H4 visa holder that has to pay double the tuition in North Carolina to NC State because she's not given in-state tuition, or in H1B, many of the green card holders, that what's happening with my status. And I have to often remind them I'm their councilman, not their congressman. So 9 times out of 10, I give them the David Price, who helps me. So I want to thank his staff if they're listening today, and Senator Tillis as well. But, the reason I started with that is that I do think that Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, who dubbed the word Samosa Caucus in the Indian United States Congress, and Raja is a friend of mine, said that if you went through the citizenship process today, it would take 150 years in America, right? And so I think we have to I like the part of the bill of eliminating the country cap. I think that helps us. I think the H4 issue, allowing spouses to work, to move in between jobs, perhaps Ann Robertson and I can work with our legislature here to get a law passed where we could give in-state tuition, just like in Virginia, and STEM graduates exemptions, allowing these students who are here. We have 21,000 international students in North Carolina that contribute about $730 million to our economy. And many of them are innovating on the COVID vaccines, research, all kinds of things, education-based exemptions. So, at the end of the day, I'll close out my thoughts. Number one, I like the bill in terms of what it's proposing for H-1B and skilled immigration and addressing the green card backlog. But I think it's really important to our global competitiveness. Chuck Robbins, the successor to John Chambers, who's a family friend of mine, former CEO of Cisco and Padma Shri winner from the nation of India, Chuck Robbins said that all these H-1B restrictions, when Trump came out, should be called the Canadian Job Creation Act, because Prime Minister Trudeau is going literally to Silicon Valley and saying, if you don't want to create your company here, you can come to our country. Okay. And so from a policy perspective, I'll say that John the other day said to me that in the next decade, we're going to automate 40% of the jobs away in the next decade, but we can create 15 million new jobs. And I can tell you right now, Prime Minister Modi is trying to get those jobs. Prime Minister Trudeau is trying to get those jobs. The Prime Minister of Israel is trying to get those jobs. So if we have an H-1B policy that's saying that we don't want skilled workers to come, they're going to go somewhere else. And I can tell you, I'm seeing this happen in Morrisville right now, where people are leaving. They're going to start their companies somewhere else. So you are, I think, going to see brain drain. And I think that's why it's really important of what we want America. We want the next Zoom, SAS, Google, Facebook started in America. And yeah, for selfish reasons, Governor Cooper and I wanted in North Carolina.
Thank you so much, Steve, and may the force be with you and with
Oh, Star
Anne.
Wars.
And
Yeah.
you guys, build up more. And for the knowledge base that you need, you have Mr. Chishti and you have Dr. Mustafa. We hope, one of the good things of having a panel is that we hope our panelists also stay in touch along the way, and it builds up a circle of friends and, knowledge experts to tap each other and such there. So thank you so much, Steve. Now, may I come on the next round? In this one, actually, it's more legislative or big picture, and each panelist, you can, take the train of thought whichever way you want to share or contribute or what you think is evolving in this conversation. And folks, please, whoever is watching, please do come by, wave by, check by, put in your comment, ask a question. Mona, thank you so much. You came by. Prasad, thank you so much. You came by. Any others who are listening, remember this is a live show, guys. So if you put in a question or a comment, we'll be more than happy to take it to our eminent panel. Now, in this round, okay, Prasad is saying, did my master's here, been here for 12 years and losing hope day by day.
Yeah.
Prasad.
It's true.
It's true.
I mean,
That's exactly what I hear every day. Sorry,
thank
Prasad.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comment. Our empathy, I think we empathize with you, of course. And so let's see how the road is ahead. Thank you so much, Prasad. It's been a pleasure to have you as, as a participant to the show, in fact. Now, in this round, each panelist could, of course, as usual, pick up any of their trends, but I highlight two big questions I want to ask. One is that more on the legislative and big picture side, looking at the experience of the Obama efforts at the 2008 through 2013 or something, right? And it couldn't pass through and the past. Are there any big picture lessons learned from that which could be applied this time? So this time that the immigration bill or some variations of the bill or bills do pass through. So are there any learnings from the past which can be applied for this time round? That's one. And a second footnote of a question regarding H1 and all, the concept of, fair enough, there's been talk of, the wages or the merit based or for the H1 for the work visa, right? The salary should be hiked, all of that debate. So where do you see that going? Would that, the wages of the H1 workers, would that be, reassessed? And the bigger one is that any lessons learned from the past which could be applied now. I do much understand the point that I think our panel has made that why executive orders kind of came around be more because the Congress has kind of become deadlocked, and I would think that maybe it'll get even more deadlocked with more redistricting coming up. So essentially, there will be chunks which are solid and you cannot work across with them. So that would be another challenge, I think, going forward even more. So Mr. Chishti, your thoughts, please, sir. You're on mute, sir.
I'm sorry, I was trying to behave myself. So I've been doing this since the 80s, and I tell you how important bipartisanship on immigration is. It's really what was elusive in 2013. Finally, Senate passed a bill in 2013, a really comprehensive bill, by 68 votes. I mean, you don't get 68 votes for anything these days, and it reached the House and it hit a big wall. Because the Republicans decided that unless the majority of the majority, their old Hastert rule, they applied that unless your majority support, no bill moves. It was not even brought for a vote. And that's sort of what we try to avoid this time, is that, I think the president, you could have different schools of thought of whether he should have gone big and bold or he should have gone small. No, that debate, he has decided to articulate a message. But that's stage one, that he has provided his vision. Now is the time to see what can be done. And my feeling is it's important actually to have some wins on the board, even if you don't get the big picture, because we have to regain hope that we can actually do things as against just putting things out. And I think for that, I think Senator Tiller's council member is really important. I mean, if you just get 10 Republican senators to agree on 2 or 3 wins, I think we have a ball going. I mean, this is where Mitt Romney's and Susan Collins of the world can come together with Democrats. And to me, this is like pick your subgroups, pick the central workers, pick dreamers, put TPS holders, put agriculture workers, get a win. And then 2 years from now, when we'll have a recovery on the economy, which is very important to this debate. How do you give 11 million people right to legally work in this country when we have a high unemployment like that? I'm hoping we'll be behind that in about 2 years when we can go to the big picture. In the meantime, let's get some wins on the board.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Chishti. Absolutely, yes. And as you said that, in the Senate, the Mitt Romneys and all, apparently there are 5 of them on the Republican side already who could, have a conversation with the Democrats. So to reach the number, slight number could be, again, going back, the point, as you mentioned, in 2013, the Senate had passed, the House didn't even take it up. So, but at the same time, yes, some wins, specific wins, encoded in legislatively, and that would show progress. Thank you so much, sir. May I now come to Ann Robertson, please, for your thoughts again on, learnings from the past and for the passage of some components or some standalone mini bills, and also again the question of the H1, particularly on the wages and how the allocation or the numbers, etc. Thank you, please.
Well, ditto to everything that Mr. Chisti said. It was very spot on for sure. I am getting now optimistic, I'm pleased to say, since I've been the person with all the bad news, because Biden has been in the Senate for so long. And he's made so many friends, and he knows how to work across the aisle, and he understands this. Remember last time, our own Lindsey Graham, I have to keep quoting him, I can't believe it, was a co-sponsor for a bill that passed in the Senate and never went anywhere in the House. It just died before it even got to the House. They just didn't even take it up. But now we're thinking it might be a flip-flop, that maybe we can get it through the House of Representatives, but it will die in the Senate. That's what some people are saying. And we feel quite sure we're going to need 60 votes in the Senate to make that happen. The good news is we've got the best champion of all, to be able to know how to go talk to people in the Senate, to know how to go across the aisle. He's got tons of friends, Biden does, in the Senate, for having been there for 30 years. He knows these people. They are friends. And so I think something could happen. Now, I have to admit, I do agree that maybe the whole package may not happen. And that's why I think it's important for this group to make your decision about your priorities. What do we want to be our number one priority, and push for that? I think pushing for the whole bill, just not going to happen. But pushing for parts of it that we think will happen. People are very optimistic, of course, about the dreamers. People are very optimistic about the people who've been here for 20 years with TPS. I would think the best thing for you to push for, of course, is to get rid of this cap for the on the visa bulletins. That is the number one thing I hear every day, including one of the people on your program, from my clients. As you've heard Councilman Rao say, they're leaving. They're getting tired. They're going up to Canada. So I think picking your fight, picking your focus, saying this is what we care about, and then focusing on that.
Yes.
H-1Bs are a nightmare. And let's not forget Ls. There are a lot of people here who try to be Ls also. H-1Bs and Ls have turned into my biggest immigration attorney, non-immigrant nightmare. And I am hoping that we can get some changes there, because those are things that can't happen without having to actually totally change the law type of thing. These are policies. So policies can be changed easier than, these huge change the law types of things. And as Councilman Rao has pointed out, I think people are starting to realize, hey, you know what? We do have a brain training. This is not good. And we're going to need these people. Remember, we've had 4 years of hire American. How many times have we heard hire American? That means don't hire Indians. Okay, let's hear it. And that's what it meant. And I believe there are people in the United States who are starting to realize that, maybe we need these talented Indians to stay here, as Councilman Rao has already pointed out, as all of us agree. So I'm hopeful that something could happen there.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Anne, for your thoughts. And we're happy that you're seeing some rays of sunshine, because when you see that and you tell us, then it shows us that there is some sun, or there's more sunlight out there, and our audiences also get some hope and essentially hope is what I think guides human life and the progress there. And thank you so much, ma'am. May I now come to Dr. Mustafa Bayoumi for a big picture now, again on this whole question. And also, I would point out one thing, a great point you made, and that Senator Biden, when he was senator, has much experience and many friends across the aisle and all. But the issue would also be, wouldn't be, how many chips can you call? I mean, immigration is one topic. There are multiple other agendas out there, right? COVID itself, let's say, the stimulus package and all. So, on how many of them would President Biden be able to, call in the chips, give, take some, etc. So, it'll actually come down to that also, maybe in the in the legislative arena. So, Dr. Bayoumi, your thoughts on this overall perspective, and also to the brain drain point, which we understand, or if you would like to, give your some insights on that, please.
Well, my main point, I think, that I would want to make right now relates to the ways in which I think the Obama administration had a great opportunity that it kind of squandered in a lot of sense, especially in the first 2 years of the administration, when they could have really moved very quickly on pushing forward a real agenda. And instead, I feel like what happened was there was a lot of quid pro quo, a lot of like, I'm going to become a big deporter in chief. As people know, Obama had a whole lot of deportations under his administration, in the sense to show you that I can also be tough on immigration so that we can then get this deal made instead. And of course, what we were left with was just the deportations in the end. And so I think that's the big error that we need to avoid this time. And we need to go forward with a lot of positive momentum and make the case for why that is the future that we should be embracing, rather than thinking that I'm going to give you something and I'm going to get something in return, at least in that sort of cynical way I think that we saw for the Obama administration.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great point and a great reminder to whosoever is kind of maybe listening or would be looking to shape the debate or any activism on this whole in this whole area. Thank you so much, Dr. Bayoumi. May I now come to Councilman Steve Rao for your thoughts on this. Lessons learned from the past, what can be applied?
Well, in terms of lessons learned, I mean, I think Obama did have an opportunity and didn't really leverage it to get as much reform done. And I think, picking up on what Ann said, I think the opportunity that President Biden has is the longstanding relationships as a senator and former vice president. He knows a lot of these people across the aisle, to spend the time, to make the phone calls, and to focus in on where they can agree on what those wins would be. I have had some positive discussions with Senator Tillis prior to the election. Before COVID, I met him in D.C. briefly, and he agreed on DACA protections. He agreed on H-1B. He had a career at IBM before he became in our North Carolina legislature and Speaker of the House as a consultant. He understands the community. And, I think it would be focusing when you're talking to people like Tom Tillis or Susan Collins. I think sometimes we focus so much on the how, we don't focus enough on the why. And I think the why would be the job drain, creating and preserving the jobs in North Carolina and other states, looking at the agricultural industry as we're having a labor shortage in our ag industry. It's really a big problem in North Carolina. Having undocumented immigrants that are doing a lot of those jobs is helpful to our economy. And then talking about the tax base. I said earlier, the new American economy has shown that the undocumented immigrants in our state of North Carolina produce about $32 billion in taxes, but that could go up about 18% if you allowed them to stay here or had some kind of a way of coming in. And so in the middle of a pandemic where we are seeing the greatest contraction of our economy since the Great Depression, I think it would behoove itself to tell the senators that there's dollars at the table, there's jobs at the table, and let's come up with an immigration reform system, whether it's piecemeal, where we can get them to agree. And I agree with Professor Chisty, we can get 10 that can buy into the why. Then the how will happen by the president leading this effort and getting it done. But just slapping everything together and trying to throw it across the other side, that's not going to work. And we've been doing that. People are quit believing now. How many times have we seen these great bills with 68 sponsors and it's dead, right? It never happens. So
sure.
I hope that answers your question. So that would be lessons learned, and then my advice of how we would do it. And I think it can be done, but it's going to take a lot of work.
Thank you so much, Steve. Absolutely, sir. And yeah, I mean, that's a great point. The why, if the why, if the why hits home, to the minds and, the intellect of the leaders, then the how to do it is probably more the mechanics of how to achieve it, the why. There should be conviction in the why. But therein, I'm reminded of a point, on the why. See, if especially on the undocumented, let's say 10, 11 million, which are there, so to say, one big fear of the Republicans is that once these guys move into, let's say, citizenship, then that's a huge block which would most probably be Democrat voters. I mean,
Mhm.
and that is a fact also, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's one big, perspective that out of the 12 million who come, maybe 80% would be, or 70% or a big chunk would be. So I think that's what kind of holds them back in terms of the political analysis, perhaps.
Hmm.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, because they got to
Now
run
we
again.
move,
Yeah. They have to
yeah,
run again for office. So,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Sure. So now, thank you so much. Now we come to the last round of this wonderful discussion, and we've had some interesting questions come in. Folks, whoever is watching it on the US India Political Action Committee page or the Imaginary Institute Facebook page, please put in your questions or comments. This is a live show, so whatever you comment right now, we can bring it to our panel and they can look and maybe answer your questions. Thank you so much. Now, the last round is a wrap up round. So, any which way you would like to wrap up or comment on the entire discussion that we've been having so far? May I start with Mr. Muzaffar Chishti, please, sir?
Well, I think we did cover most of it. I mean, I just think that to the extent there's any roundup, is that I think we really should celebrate what happened here last week. There's no way, at least on many issues, but on issues of immigration, this is a sea change. This is a sea change not only to the world, that we had really abandoned our roots. We had forgotten how immigration was central to the DNA of our country. And we could not tell other countries in the world to be good to refugees or to accept them when we did not accept any in our own country. So just from a messaging signal point of view, this is a huge change. And I think what President Biden wanted to signal was that he just does not want to unwind Trump, which is a big enough agenda in itself, as you rightly point out. Our own institute pointed out 400 odd actions. That's very difficult. But he wanted to go beyond unwinding Trump, that he wanted to really have an agenda and a vision of immigration, which sort of makes people confront how important it is both in our historical terms and for our future. And the pieces that we are now seeing him put forward are exactly what communicate that message and hopefully will have the building blocks to make that vision realize.
Thank you so much, sir, for your wrap-up comments. And as you were concluding, we have Mona participating. Thank you so much, Mona. You've also been continuously with us for the entire session. Thank you so much. Her point is that lobbying for immigration based on job creation, brain drain, and economic growth now must be carried out by Republican states for this to actually work. California and other states are already doing that, and this keeps getting filed under a leftist agenda. Numbers that Steve mentioned in the beginning need to be out there. Thank you so much, Mona, for your thought and your analysis and contribution to this discussion and to the takeaway that we will be having. And what you said is also going to other audiences who are listening right now. Thank you so much, Mona. May I now come to Ann Robertson for your concluding wrap-up comments and anything else or you would like to point out, share with the panel and with our viewers. Ann, please.
Well, first of all, I want to be practical. Does that surprise you? And that is that, yes, I agree that the general tenor about immigration is Biden is trying to change it. Okay. But getting practical, how does it get changed? And Mona just said it. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. We must change what our legislators are doing, both state and nationally. And how do you do that? Well, you start with all the statistics, of course, that Councilman Rao mentioned, but you pick a certain number of issues. You've already heard me say I would recommend, based on what my Indian clients are telling me, eliminate the per country visa caps on both family and the employment-based areas, getting a fast track for STEM degrees, letting the people who are waiting outside the country to come to the front of the line for their green cards to wait inside the country. These are already in the bill, so you can read about them. But just be practical. Look at yourself. What's in the bill that makes a difference to your life? And then choose to focus on those things too. And I think that's the way to do it. Lobbying, and I'm sorry to say it, donating money. Money talks, people listen. Getting involved in those campaigns with the people that you know are going to work on the issues you want them to work on. I'm a great believer in the fact that political power is the way to make the change. We've already found out beautiful speeches talking about how great immigrants are, pointing to the Statue of Liberty just doesn't get us anywhere. It's going to be one-on-one with your senator, with your representative, with the people that are involved in making the votes that will make the difference.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ann Robertson. I think, yeah, well taken. And of course, absolutely. In a sense, yeah, definitely pick your battles. And for those battles, go down and, advocate, lobby, pressurize, donate, campaign, volunteer with them, so that to get there, to convince them of the why, as our panel was saying, and then the how will fall in place. Thank you so much, ma'am. May I now invite Dr. Mustafa Bayami for your wrap-up comments, any thoughts you would like to share with us, sir?
I keep thinking how much of a pleasure it has been to talk with all of you today, and how nice it is to be able to be somewhat optimistic at this moment in history. And I just imagine what would have happened had Donald Trump won the second term. Everything would be so entirely different from this conversation that we're having. So that to me is an important way of thinking about the future. In the same way that I think we can make all kinds of arguments about where we're going to be headed, and they don't have to necessarily be seen as being Democratic arguments or Republican arguments either. Frankly, and it seems to me that you can make a very good, even like a kind of economic libertarian argument for a more open-bordered immigration policy in the United States that people on the left, people on the right could both easily agree with. So, and I think that's true also globally at the same time, too, that we need to also have a much more humane position when we're thinking about how we just traverse our borders around the world. I know that's not the focus of what we're talking about here today, but if you think about the numbers of dead people who are there on the border, on the southern border of this country, or in the Mediterranean right now, also trying to cross over into Europe, all over the world, we have a real crisis when it comes to thinking about what are we going to do around border issues. And I think that there's a way in which we need to bring all of that together in conversation so that we're not just screaming at each other from very old positions of left and right, because there's actually much more to be gained by rethinking our world as a world where we're sharing our humanity. And, I think maybe to end on the most, I think the COVID crisis, the pandemic, can actually be a way of bringing that to us all at the same time. And maybe it might be a small point, a very small point, but actually I think that the fact that on all of the cable news stations right now, when you have the physicians who are talking about COVID, almost all of them are coming from South Asia or from the Middle East, and they're the ones who are giving the advice and all the wisdom and knowledge. And that stuff I think does also matter. And so I'll just end on that note.
That's good.
Thank you so much, Professor. I think you raised some very interesting points. One, the fact that, reframing or a relook in terms of economic libertarian, as you're saying, perspectives. And then also, of course, compassion, apart from the economic one, the issue of migration has a lot of refugees and human rights issues and all. So compassion and humane perspectives, if they can be brought into, let's say, the discussion or considerations as these policies will be framed. Certainly. So, in fact, to the point that you said, pertaining to the COVID, and you would pardon me because, we look at Indian and US-India relations. To my mind, this could be, from an economic or trade promotion point of view of India, this could be like the Y2K movement for India, for India's pharma and health industry. You see, India's technology industry really had a quantum jump due to the Y2K crisis. That the year 2000 coming, banks have to change, so there was chaos. So companies needed people to change those codes. So that's when the Indian IT industry kind of came up and said, yeah, we can provide the people, they can come in and do it. That's when remote working and offshoring, etc., really kind of became comfortable. That culture developed, and due to that, you see where's India's IT industry today. So in fact, I've been talking to some folks and saying, guys, figure out a plan or a way that wherein this can be, if not a Y2K, but something like that, to give a huge fillip or boost to India, US India cooperation in the healthcare pharma industry. Thank you so much, Dr. Uh, Bayumi. Now, may I invite Councilman Steve Rao for your concluding wrap-up comments, sir, please.
Well, it's been an honor to be with each of you today, and I want to thank everyone from around the country and India and around the world who's been watching this. And I think I'm very selective about what I wear, and I wore purple today in the principle of bipartisanship. But I really wanted to wear my Alexander Hamilton shirt because that's my favorite musical, and my favorite line in that is "Immigrants get the job done." And we often forget that an immigrant, Alexander Hamilton, came to America and became the $10 founding father by working harder and smarter. And that's the truth for many immigrants that come to America, including my own parents, my in-laws, and the many, many thousands that I represent in Morrisville and the Triangle region. And I think American greatness has always been about encouraging the best and brightest. I think it's about jobs and talent and creating and filling those jobs. And I think that it's about the economic impact. And we have work to do in terms of border control, illegal immigrants. But I think the first thing is we have to phrase immigration in a positive way, not only for Democrats, but Republicans, so they can see the value and they can remember of the great contributions that they're making. And I'll end with this. We often talk about, I didn't talk a lot about the technology sector, but I'm in that industry. And we have a lot of tech shortage today. For every 15 jobs posted, there's for one opening. And you just can't find the talent. But about a year and a half ago, Salil Parekh, the CEO of Infosys, was here in Raleigh. And Infosys opened up their 10th innovation hub, and Governor Cooper was there. And Mr. Parekh said that many of the jobs that Infosys is working with our community college system are jobs that don't exist today. Many of them are in AI, robotics, smart cities, sensors. So this is a time when we need that talent because we just can't produce enough people to do it. And I think that's one argument from the skill piece, but I think that's so important from a policy perspective that the Senator Cottons of the world and the other senators on the other side, the Trump base understands that this is about the global competitiveness of America and even the undocumenteds that are producing to our agricultural industry. So I think that would be my closing argument is that immigrants get the job done, and we've got to continue to remind them that we do. And the final thing I'll say is the data. So for anybody that wants any of the data that I presented, you can go to newamericaneconomy.org. And I want to thank Jeremy Robbins because I'm on the board. And former New York City Mike Bloomberg is the chair. He's been and former Democratic presidential candidate, but he's been a big proponent of immigration reform. And I think that's what we have to focus on. But I want to thank US Impact and Robinder for hosting this panel. And maybe next time I'll wear my Alexander Hamilton shirt.
Thank you so much, Steve. In fact, we've had two comments from our audiences coming. I must read them out to you. One is coming from Vikram Singh Chauhan. Vikram is saying, great show. Would like to thank the experts. And now we can talk of immigration in a humane way. It will be family reunification and not chain migration and post-pandemic rejuvenated USA. Thank you so much, Vikram. Yes, one takeaway from this conversation has been that how could we look, or reframing the context or the why of immigration reform from a different perspective or different prism to bring about the positive change that may be needed. Thank you so much, Vikram, for coming by, checking by, and for your comment. The next one we had was from Mona. And Steve, it seems your Hamilton reference is pretty much appreciated, sir. So Mona says, immigrants, we get the job done. That Hamilton reference just did it for me. Thank you for this very important and balanced session. Thank you so much, Mona. It's been a pleasure to have you and your participation. Prasad, thank you so much. You've stayed on the whole show. Thank you, sir. So Prasad says, I'm from Durham. Well, it seems you're the North Carolina Mafia all around us. Thanks so much, Robinder and Steve, Muzaffar and Mustafa. Thank you so much, Prasad, for participating and sharing your comments, which helped us to kind of, provoke ourselves and our panel into this beautiful discussion. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure for me to host this discussion with each of you. I thank you, Mr. Mustafa Chishti. Thank you so much for your time and your comments and analysis, sir. Thank you, Ms. Anne Robertson. Thank you so much for your time and comments. Thank you so much, Dr. Mustafa Bayumi, for being with us again. We look forward to having you maybe some other time also. Thank you so much, Councilman Steve Rao, for your participation in this panel. With this said, the show is over now. Thank you so much, folks. This was the Saturday noon hour Eastern Time, hosted by the US India Political Action Committee and the Imaginary Institute. A recording of this would be available on our YouTube page also, and we'll be sharing with our panel also, of course. That's it. Have a beautiful day. Thank you, everyone. The show is over now.